folks, welcome back to Game Geeks. I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Today's episode are a pair of products for the Pathfinder role-playing game. Try saying that when you've had a few drinks in you. They are Ultimate Magic and Ultimate Combat. Folks, these are exactly what they say on the tin. These are expansions for combat-focused characters and magic-focused characters. We're going to kind of go through each one of these in order in a little bit of detail. And because, let's face it, if you're playing Pathfinder, which is one of the mainstays of the fantasy genre right now, you probably want to be killing things. As much as we like to pretend that we do this highbrow role-playing where it's conversations and politics, at the end of the day, even the most ardent theatrical White Wolf player loves to just break out their potence and beat the crap out of a werewolf. So, in Ultimate Combat, what do we have? Well, it's expansions, like I said, specifically for combat-based characters. It gives you a new based class, which is the Gunslinger. So if you want to introduce black powder games or other firearms into your Pathfinder game, this is your opportunity. And a couple of alternate classes, the Ninja and the Samurai. So obviously this brings in a real Oriental adventure sort of feel to it. It then gives you some archetypes and options for the other existing classes. And one of the things I like about this is they don't ignore the sorcerer or the wizard. Because they realize, hey, you know what? These characters are just as interested in combat as everyone else. They might go about it a little bit differently, but they're still there. So you have both new archetypes and new sort of applications for the powers for virtually every class that you can think of, including ones that were introduced in other expansions, such as the Alchemist and the Cavalier. As you might expect from a book that is derivative of D20, there are a host of new feats for you to choose from, most of them combat-related in one form or another that you get to apply to the overall setting. The other thing I like about this is it gives you a chapter on sort of expanding your ideas about what combat can be. There's a chapter on vehicle rules, so that finally gives you some ideas about how to really do good chases and vehicles for both land, water, and, let's face it, because it's a fantasy game, air. I don't know about you, but I've always had this dream about flying in a dragon-powered dirigible from one city to another in a fantasy world. Maybe that comes back to my Lone Wolf days where you had the Skyrider, which was this giant ship that banged and flew. But that's another game and another story. There are some variant rules which a lot of us will recognize from older products that they bring in, such as armor no longer adds to your difficulty of being hit, but it's now a damage reduction. Better rules for called shots, putting together armor, and finally, one of the more controversial additions to D20 since its origins all the way back to, I think, the first Star Wars D20 game back in the early 2000s, which is the wounds versus vitality or vigor, which is sort of you have two levels of hit points. One of them actually hurts you. One of them just represents your, whew, that was close points. New weapons, finally rounded out. There is a very definite Oriental Adventures feel to this, like I mentioned, which you would expect from anything that includes base classes of Ninja and Samurai. But that's okay. Again, I've been harping on this lately. Those of us who have been around a while remember Dungeons & Dragons Oriental Adventures game and what that added to the first edition of AD&D many, many years ago before it got rolled into Karatur. The second thing I want to talk about is Pathfinder Ultimate Magic. Flip side to Ultimate Combat, this provides you with a lot more information about magic, both arcane and divine, for your game. As you would expect from a book like this, a butt-ton of new spells. I wouldn't expect anything less. If they promised me a book on magic and there weren't new spells, I would be scratching my head going, yeah, that just happened. Okay. So, what does this book give you that's new and different? Well, one of the things it gives you is it gives you a new sort of base class or alternate class if you choose to include it, which is the Magus, which is sort of your pre-built fighter wizard group. There are a couple of different ways that this can be approached. There have been a variety of approaches to it over the years since D20 sort of streamlined everything. This works as well as, if not better than, a lot of the ones that we've already seen. The spell list in this, however, I should point out, is based more on intelligence than, say, charisma like the bard or the sorcerer would be. From there, just as in Ultimate Combat, it gives you new options, archetypes, ideas for your character. It goes through every character type that you would expect. Fighter is missing, but let's face it, if you have a fighter throwing around magic, there's probably something a little bit wrong in your game. A lot of love is paid to the summoner, the witch, the wizard, paladin, rangers, even monks get some attention here because some of the key powers can be equated into magic. From there, new feats that you can use, the new bloodlines for a sorcerer. There are a lot of options for different aspects you can lay onto your character if you want to focus on outsiders, if you want to focus on elementalists. One of the things I like is it does bring focus on that instead of saying you want to play a necromancer or a summoner character, you can focus on an elemental type instead. So you are a hydromancer or a geomancer, for example, which has nothing to do with small cars that run around and no one actually fits into, that you can pick up and put into the back of the average pickup truck. If you get that reference, congratulations, you survived the 90s. Okay, from here, the other thing I like is it gives you a new sort of option for magic, which is word magic or words of power. All it does is give you a different point of view, a more flexible approach to slinging spells, but at the same time isn't quite as... It balances in with regular spellcasting. So if you wanted an alternate approach, if you wanted something a bit more primal to tie into the nature of what magic is, and almost a build-your-own spell like you would see in a urban fantasy game like either of the Mage games or Ghosts of Albion for Unisystem, then that's something you want to use there. What it reminded me of instantly when I was reading it was the difference between low path and high path magic as presented in the Raymond E. Feist Rift War novels. Same sort of approach, just a different point of view. Now, obviously, I can't go into laborious detail about what's in both of these books because A, they're considerable, and B, there's a lot in here that is modular. You can pick and choose what you want to use. If words of power don't float your boat at all and you think that elemental wizards are dumb, don't use them. It's like if you don't think that the ninja and the samurai belong in your average fantasy game, guilty, don't use them. As a small lagniappe for this episode, what I'd like to show you is something else that Pathfinder has produced, which I think is really good. There are a lot of conditions with which you can get smacked in a Pathfinder game. Everything from exhausted, to dazed, to nauseated, grappled, shaken, sickened, staggered, helpless, whatever. A lot of these sound very similar, especially if you get to something like shaken or staggered and you're used to playing other games like, say, Savage Worlds, you might get a little confused about what these mean. They've produced these little cards, which seem pretty darn straightforward, until you realize that you're a simple creature like me and you need reminding of what some of these mean. So let's say that something happens in the game and you get sickened. Something happens and you really don't feel good. What it does is it breaks down for you exactly what that means, and you just keep that in front of you, and that way you or your GM or one of your other players who likes to point out every little flaw that you have, "Hi, Mike," tells you get a -2 penalty on all attack rolls, weapon damage rolls, saving throws, skill checks, and ability checks until you get rid of this. But if it really gets bad, if you go from sickened to nauseated, in which you are very sick, in that case, you can't do diddly. And it has kind of little funny phrases underneath, like for sickened and nauseated is gurgle, and it's got a picture of a goblin about to throw up, which is probably one of the scarier things I can think of happening in a game. That and, an orc giving you the come hither look. That's not in here. So if you are a simple creature like me and you like to be reminded what some of these different conditions mean, this is really something that's worth investing in, particularly if you play this a lot and you really just want to be able to keep up with what it is. This is also really great for something that goes along with, say, the beginner box, if you want to introduce these conditions to your characters, but again, have some sort of handy little physical manipulative thing for you to be able to use to remind people of what it does. For Game Geeks, I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Good day and good gaming.